Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Sports History. Last class, we were speaking about the WNBA. Now we're going to go back a little bit in history and talk about the beginnings of women's sports. All right, I wanted to dovetail the NBA and WNBA, but now we're going to go back in time. And the time we're going to go look back into is between 1860 and 1945, and how society looked upon women who wanted to participate in various sports. And initially, during this period, the late 1800s, early 1900s, there was a big push against having women participate in various sports. My question to you is why? Why? Why would there be such a push? Why would there be opponents to women's participation? And what would these opponents base their beliefs on? Right? Well, okay, you may not believe that, but why? So some of the reasons they gave was that if women participate in sports, they're going to sacrifice their femininity. I don't necessarily know if that's true. I don't believe so. And if so, who cares? I mean, and at the same time, if they sacrifice their femininity, they're going to adapt masculine traits. Interestingly enough, too, in the early part of the 1900s, there was some debunked research out there that said, well, if women participate in sports, they're going to damage their reproductive organs, and women need to be reproduce so they can't participate in sports. Well, that research has been debunked. I mean, and there's some studies now that say, participating and being athletic and being in shape actually help the process. It's for men too, right? I mean, and who's to say if you participate on the male side, if you participate in sports, your reproductive organs can't be damaged. I mean, so it was faulty research, been debunked. But that was one of the arguments for not having women's participation. In addition, they said that women can't control their emotions. How could they participate in sport if they can't control their emotions? Well, I don't know if you saw, over the past weekend, the tennis player beating up his racket because he lost a match in the Olympics. I mean, well, okay, sports is an emotional game, right? No sex is more emotional than the others when it comes to sport. And the last thing is because women are nervous. They can't participate in sport because they're nervous. They can't control themselves, right? They can't handle the pressure. Well, when you throw your racket into the stands, maybe you can't control your emotions. And maybe, you have some, whatever. But, these were some of the arguments. In addition, they thought that, if women participate in sports, they would get hypersexual. They could get serious bodily injury. And, their responsibility is on domestics, right? They need to take care of the house, the home, the children. And if they're out playing sport, they're going to take away from that domestic responsibility. They need to be a wife and mother first before they should participate in sport. I don't know why you can't do both, but this was the feeling in the sense back then. And there was this, male fear or male jealousy of losing their women to sport. I mean, which I think is, an interesting concept. What happens if a man gets beat by a woman? Oh my God, right? The world will come to an end. Or, if you lose your wife or spouse or girlfriend, whatever it is, to sport. I mean, so there was this opposition to having women participate in these early years. Young women were supposed to play with dolls, not balls, right? They called young women who played sport tomboys, right? They would become muscle bound, or worse if they engage. You shouldn't be engaging in this physical activity because your muscles will grow. Interesting. And that was the theory carried over into the Olympics. Remember Pierre de Coubertin, the founder of the Olympic Games. He felt that women should be excluded from the modern games because he felt that their participation would be inappropriate. His quote being, "No matter how toughened the sportswoman may be, her organism is not cut out to sustain certain shocks." And this is the founder of the modern Olympic Games, right, coming out and saying such nonsense, right? He didn't want women to participate. And as we remember, Women did not participate in the 1896 game. However, by 1900, though, it started to change. Women were included in the games in 1900. Right? There was also this Dr. Dudley A. Sargent, who is quoted saying, "Women as a class cannot stand prolonged mental or physical strain as well as men." Right? Leaders must make certain to limit women in sport because, per his studies, again, they suffer from nervous collapse and breaking down with heart trouble due to excessive exercise. Right? Who is this guy? Right? Who is Dudley A. Sargent? And his studies, like I said, were rebunked. Right? There's nothing to say that women nervous system will collapse or break down due to excessive exercise. I mean, I just watched over the weekend. I watched the CrossFit Games. Yeah, nobody's breaking down due to excessive exercise. By the late 1800s, though, women started to become more involved in sport, and one of the reasons being because of basketball. Right, basketball was picked up by the colleges and universities and YMCA, and women participated in this game. And at the same time, physical education classes for women were introduced at various colleges and high schools. And colleges started to offer limited programs, like I said, basketball, volleyball, tennis, to have women participate because they found it was beneficial after a day of study or a day of work, to get out there and do some form of physical exercise. Right? So colleges offered limited programs, basketball, volleyball, tennis, and even swimming. Right, so starting to get women involved in sport, get them involved in teaching sport through physical education classes. By the 1920s, progressed 40 years, things started to change even more. Right, August 2019, women were finally granted the right to vote. Right, so now they had a say into what was happening in society. Right, without the right to vote, they really didn't have a right to, an opportunity to say how things should go in society. But with the 19th Amendment passing in 1920, women now have the right to vote, and they're invested in how things are going to happen. Right. Also, by the 1920s, clothing started to change, less cumbersome. Late 1800s, mid to late 1800s, women were supposed to be, all dressed up, dressed down, layers of clothing. Can't expose any of your skin to men because, what will men do if they see an ankle? Layers of petticoats, corsets, large and ornate hats. And sometimes all this clothing could weigh up to 15 pounds. So imagine on a beautiful summer day where it's 98 degrees and you're wearing up to 15 pounds of clothing, just so you look good, you fit in properly to society, right? So look at those layers. This is the women's basketball team in 1902. I mean, it's a pretty excessive outfit to be wearing to play the game of basketball. A lot of layers, right? All these long pants, long sleeves, hats, all to participate in sport. And even when you're bike riding, right? Again, long skirts and a bike may not be the best combination out there. All right. By 1920, clothing styles became less cumbersome. Now knee-length skirts, which helped with when you're riding a bike. Your hair was becoming bob. And more importantly, women, because they got the power, the right to vote, started to hold public office, started to attend college at a higher rate, at a higher level, started to attend graduate schools. Women started to smoke, which maybe didn't help with the the sports side, and they also began to drink alcohol. All right, maybe again not helping with the sports side, but showing how women were being more included into a male-dominated society, right? Breaching that, going into public office, more college, more graduate schools, more law schools, more med schools, smoking, drinking, all those things that are typically what men are supposed to do. All right, but by the 1920s, that started to change. Okay, and by this time, there was two women, right? Two America's first women sports stars out there. Helen Wills was the first one. Now, Helen Wills, she was great at creating awareness of what a female athlete could accomplish, what women as athletes could accomplish, right? She was a tennis star. She a tennis star at a whopping 5'7". All right, you think of tennis stars now, they're usually taller than that. But, during this period of time, she was a tennis star at a whopping 5'7". She had uncanny power and accuracy in placing shots, as it was reported. She dominated the tennis world from the 27 to the mid-30s, winning 6 U.S. Open titles, 4 Wimbledon titles, and between 1927 and 1933, she won 180 straight matches without losing a single set. That's pretty dominant, right? For a 6-7 year period, 180 straight matches without losing a single set, right? Wow, fantastic! I don't know if a guy's ever done that. And this is Helen Wills here, playing the game of tennis. Another woman who was considered one of the leaders or first female athletes who got notoriety was Gertrude Edler. Edler. I'll never pronounce it. Ederle. I got it there. I think I got it that time. Gertrude Ederle. Her sport was swimming. In 1922, she set 7 world records all in one day. Right? 7 world records in one day. I don't know about you, but I haven't set one world record. All right, but she set 7 world records in one day. Between 1922 and 1925, she held 25 national and world records. Amazing. In the 1924 Olympics, the first time sports was held in the Olympics in limited form, she won a gold and 2 bronze. And in 1926, she was the first woman to swim the English Channel. 35 miles. An estimated 35 miles. The distance between France and England is 21 miles, but there was some weather when she swam, so they estimate it took her a longer distance, and it ended up being approximately 35 miles. A 35-mile swim. Imagine that. I mean, amazing. So, what I want you to do is to start thinking about women in sport. All right, and your assignment, I'm going to also put this in the email. I'm going to give you an assignment on what I want you to do with thinking about women in sport in the early stages. Okay? All right, enough for today. Any questions, comments, criticisms, please give me a call, text me, email me, whatever it is, and I'll see you here tomorrow. Thank you.